A couple of quick questions. How many of you use Dropbox? Thank you very much. You're amongst about 400 million people around the world, 75% of which are outside the United States. We actually see larger adoption per capita in Europe and Asia because of the rise of mobile devices. So second question, how many of you use Dropbox at work? Thank you very much. You're part of the people who've brought Dropbox, usually at an individual level, into about 8 million businesses, including 99% of the Fortune 500. So the third question is, in how many of your companies is Dropbox Business or Enterprise an official solution? Thank you. You are part of the, thank you. You are part of the 150,000 companies who have chosen to deliver Dropbox as a managed solution. And our mission is to try to bring those two worlds together. Anyone who's using a Dropbox at work, we want them to be using and managed solutions that can both give them the power of that end user experience and value, but also tie to enterprise controls, management, and there's a huge increase in the value of the collaboration when you're in the work context, and I'll talk about that in a second. But ultimately, what we see this overarching trend is about really empowering innovation at the end user level. And I think there's lots of things we've seen in the industry that do kind of a top-down drive around innovation or driving collaboration, but we've really seen, call it consumerization, call it whatever you want, waves of innovation that is occurring. And I think we're seeing one of the biggest ones around collaboration right now. So when you think about it, it is this shift from a traditionally hierarchical structured model for collaboration. We have CMSs, we have all sorts of processes, we have media systems, we have lots of stuff that has been built to show people how to collaborate around content. But individuals, often highly talented ones, are creating things on their own and discovering other platforms to create, collaborate around, and to deliver great content, mostly because they're trying to tap into networks. They're trying to tap into networks of other talent, other individuals. And we've seen this shift even in the way our product is used from access into collaboration. But we used to look at lots of different tools, ourselves and many others that have cropped up in the market, that is really about empowering people to work together, but not by kind of a mandated structured model, but in a free-form way that allows them to get things done faster, more easily connected with more individuals. And it's this shift that we're really excited about discussing. It is being led by end users. There's a different dynamic in terms of expectations from the technology, from what that experience is. It's got to be easy to use. It's got to be open. It's got to be ubiquitous. It's got to be accessible by hundreds of millions of other individuals in millions and millions of businesses to really make those connections work. And to give you an example in one company, this is a picture, each of these dots is a person, and this is in one media company's adoption. It's a Fortune 100 media company, one division where they saw kind of lots of people working, using technology, and gradually connecting with each other over time. There was nothing about that this was managed. No one said, you are in a work group together. There was no directory service connection. There was nothing. This is all done by the users starting to work and make these persistent connections. And it's the persistent connections that drive the largest value. Because it's not, oh, I just sent something over email, but where is this shared space or this shared location that I can work on something simultaneously with someone else? Very quickly, very iteratively, and drive change in how I can deliver things. And when you think about this, each of the lines is a connection. This is the sort of viral networks that are being created inside businesses. They're also affecting workflow. And now this is actually specifically around a Dow Jones sales team that is going around trying to sell video placements to advertisers for lots of their different periodicals. And they're touching their creative teams that are creating, showing the spots, showing different things that are being done. They're talking to their legal teams, their marketing teams and collateral. They're working with the agency, who's usually the buyer of the advertising, for the end customer, and they're working with the end customer. They're touching many different applications. Some are content-oriented, some are process or sales-oriented, and they have to kind of navigate this workflow all the way through. And they're going in and out of different systems and different applications. And this sales team just started to use a platform that brought it together. It was the one place that all of these different applications and things could touch. And they started to define a new kind of workflow that was outside of the kind of top-down mandated approach that was delivering a faster, better experience for the customer process. Another example of something like this is Saturday Night Live. Now, Saturday Night Live is sort of unique in the production world because they're creating and finishing something in a total of 7 days, from scratch to completion. So they have to move very fast. They have external guests that are coming in. There's a lot of collaboration and work that's going inside amongst the production team, the actors, as well as outside entities. And they started again by one of the production managers said, there's got to be a platform that helps us do this. That helps us cross these divides, make these connections. And they saw a huge impact on the speed and the ease by which they could do things. And they drove more and more, spread it across, and it's really the backbone around all of their content creation that leads up to the show, whether it's with guest actors or hosts, musical guests, guest writers. It really works both on the team that's part of the organization as well as extending well outside all the different parts that they connect. And it's this gap that we see happening more and more often. There is this world of kind of enterprise content that has been built very highly structured. And then there is the world where there is enormous innovation. There is enormous productivity happening, both with big application platforms, Google, Microsoft, Adobe, others, but also at hundreds of thousands of little apps. Apps like iAnnotate, where executive producers and studio heads are receiving scripts by boatloads that were often previously delivered to them physically in paper, with drivers dropping them off at their house or their office routinely throughout the day, are now getting them on an iPad, looking at them in an application like iAnnotate, where they can mark up those scripts very easily right through the iPad, save it, and have it shared right directly back with the writer or any of the other people who are collaborating around that script. And it has eliminated all of the craziness of getting those scripts to the producers at the right time. And it's also created a more intimate experience between them and the writer in a more scalable way, so the producer doesn't have to take more time with each writer, but is actually able to touch and reach more of them at a higher volume. And that's just one of many, many apps that are occurring on the sort of right side of this picture, which are creating new value every single day. In media and sort of the creation part of your business, it's even more extreme, because the systems on the left were not built very well for iterative collaboration around very large, complex files like videos or audio files, things like that. And we sort of made them work, but they don't tend to be particularly easy to use. They don't tend to capture the innovation of some of the applications on the right that users are using and finding on their own. Many of them are mobile apps. Many of them are cloud apps or web apps. And they're finding new ways to edit, to create, to collaborate around content that are outside of what has been built on the structured side of things. And it's this kind of gap in which Dropbox has really focused its business. And we see an opportunity to bring together these four things. And if you think about all of the productivities applications on the right side, Dropbox is blessed, given its scale, that a lot of these applications have built off of the Dropbox APIs to build integrations, so that Dropbox is the largest repository of Office files. It's the largest repository of Adobe files. There's about 140 billion Office documents that are stored in Dropbox. It does native previews on design files, on audio files, on video files to really make that experience easy and intuitive. And there's 300,000 apps that are built off of the APIs so that it can really become a platform for all of those applications on the right side of the picture. On the left side, we have the enterprise content. And all of the content, which in many cases is our most valuable content within businesses. But it doesn't necessarily easily transfer to the productivity side of the world. And how do we bring these two together? How do we use integrations to pull that content, still allow it to exist where there's a lot of business logic, a lot of workflow, a lot of value around the content on the left, but make it accessible in the mobile world, make it accessible to all of these productivity apps. And core to that are the other two dimensions of this. On the bottom, we talk about the collaboration network. I showed you one of the pictures before. The stat that we are most excited about, even more than the number of users, is the fact that there have been 2.8 billion connections created with Dropbox. And that is growing at more than 100% a year. So it's about 1.3 billion at the end of 2014 and 2.8 billion end of last year. These are people creating persistent connections so they can collaborate on content. Since no one else has described a scale of that large, we believe we're the largest external collaboration network in the world. And when you can take all of the productivity apps, combine it with a collaboration network, create integrations to your core enterprise content, and then wrap security around it. And that's the fourth piece of this. Dropbox business was launched about 3 years ago. And our focus has been bringing all of the enterprise class security you expect of the applications on the left and allowing them to apply into a platform that brings that control, that visibility, that reporting to all the productivity apps on the right and all of the external collaboration happening on the bottom. And part of the way we've done that is building deep integrations to all security tools that people are using and building the core native features that you expect to have full control. So it's this kind of combination of these four things that is really driving us and has driven us in 3 years to reach 150,000 paying companies. I was at Salesforce before I joined Dropbox. It took us 10 years to get to 100,000 companies. Dropbox got to 100,000 in less than 2. It reached 150,000 companies in less than 3. Half of those companies are part of the Fortune 500. So it is small businesses as well as some of the largest. And you can see some of the industry leaders across lots of different industries. A lot of the adoption has come from industries like media, like technology, like education, where the use cases around large files, the need to collaborate across boundaries is really important. And where you have highly influential decision makers like teachers in academia or creative leaders or actors or talent in your industries. Core to that, when you're handling that kind of a scale and those kind of complex, has been as architecture that's really been built around scale and a model that is very distributed. Every file, so if you take a 400 megabyte video, we don't actually store it as a video. We break that 400 megabyte video into 104 megabyte chunks. The reason we do that is because if you're editing a 400 megabyte video and you make a change and you've shared it with 50 people who are accessing it from 2 or 3 devices each, there might be 150 different versions of that 400 megabyte video. Do you want everyone to have to load a 400 meg video every time you make a change? No, we can track which of those 104 megabyte actual blocks changed, and we'll sync just the deltas. And this scales into the terabyte size. One of our largest is actually Under Armour, who syncs their product catalogs between their design teams and manufacturers. Designers are in Amsterdam, manufacturers are in Asia. And they're making changes on an entire product catalog is larger than a terabyte for each file, but they're just syncing the deltas, so they're making changes that get updated in seconds, rather than what actually took days because they would ship hard drives. So there's no other alternative to do that. The performance has been one of the big reasons why we did that, but it also has a security benefit because we individually encrypt each of those file blocks. We also store all the metadata about those file blocks in an entirely different service. So if someone were to try to recreate that 400 megabyte file, they'd first have to break into our encrypted in transit, encrypted in rest core storage service. They have to find the right 100 4 megabyte blocks amongst the other billion files a day that those blocks are scrambled with. And then they'd need to find and break into the metadata in order to be able to put those 100 blocks together correctly. And it's a fundamentally more secure architecture. Those are the things that have been core to us building in the business market. But the real things have been the impact that companies are creating from this. First, when you take that workflow that I showed before in Dow Jones, and it is neat to see what users are doing. But when you then can start to analyze and find triggers and things that they've created unique value, and either help them find even more efficient ways to do it, or expose a process that a subgroup have done more broadly, you create huge value. That Under Armour example I talked about, they took their product development cycle and shortened it by weeks. That has huge benefits to that company. They also made it more iterative, which is as valuable, although not as measurable. The other part of this is when you think about these networks, they are a representation of all of your business relationships. So this is a picture of the external collaboration done by one company in the travel industry of how they're collaborating with all of different parts of their ecosystem, how that's grown over time. Each of the lines is a connection between companies, and the scale of the line tells you the scale, the volume of those connections. And we are building tools so that companies can actually see that data, drill into it, uncover value, and understand where they're collaborating across their ecosystem. What are the directions? What are the geographic structures? What are those kind of things? And for a while, as we built the security tools, we've exposed it from a security perspective, so you can create notifications and do reporting and all that. But now we're exposing it in a business value sense, where you can see where your network is, see where the connections are being made across your ecosystem. And then the third piece of the value has been security. And when you think about that viral adoption that I talked about before, the beauty of taking a consumer tool and turning it into a business managed solution is you've already got the adoption. So you're harnessing it and you're helping bring it into the business. And this is an example of a media company who did harness all of these users, and what you'll see is the color change that means that a shift to the business solution. And what happens is we actually send the users an invite saying your company has now embraced this tool. Click here if you would like to join the business managed version. Click here if you're using this for personal, you're just using your work email address and you want to shift it to another email address. What we found is 85% of the users click to join the business solution because they're not fighting being part of a business solution, they just weren't given alternatives. So this shows you during this process, once you start to engage and capture that viral adoption, you can really turn it into value, and the network itself starts to increase. It starts to become even bigger. They bring more connections in, they create more adoption, and it becomes an even tighter network across the business. So I wanted to show you one story very related to the production industry. It's about Sundance. So we've got a video that we're going to show you briefly about, and you think about Sundance, it's almost the consummate example of lots of different creative teams coming together around an event, around a process, around a moment. And let's roll the video.
At Sundance, we present original and new and fresh voices that may not be heard otherwise in the mainstream film industry. We have filmmakers pouring their heart and soul and bank accounts into making these movies that represent their own personal stories.
The festival is 10 days of organized chaos. With 23 screens, we show over 700 screenings for about 50,000 individuals. We've sold tickets, we've told people when the show is gonna start. We don't get a second chance if something's not right.
We start out with 12,600 submissions. We want to find fresh and original stories. If we didn't watch all the movies, we might miss a lot of those. When everything was on DVD, everybody had to be based in LA, or else we were shipping stuff all over the world. In the past, we had all of these different spreadsheets that we were sending around on email attachments, and I'm dealing with thousands of movies that are 2 to 4 gigs.
I've run so many thumb drives through the wash over the years.
We're always looking for ways to reduce our costs, reduce our overhead, and allow us to focus on finding better tools for everyone to do their job.
When I first started using Dropbox, the first thing that kind of popped out at me was the reliability of it. I mean, it all just works. When I send somebody a shared folder, I can be sure that it's gonna show up as quickly as it possibly can on every device that I need to access it on. Most of our screeners watch around 20 or 25 movies a week. Dropbox has enabled us to keep all of that in one central location where everybody can access it. The video preview is great because it saves us from having to download a huge file before we know what we're getting.
Our programming team is working with the filmmakers. I'll share a folder with panelists. They're able to upload their content, edit them, share them to me. I don't need to explain the process.
Also, just any one-off instance where a member of the press needs a file, Dropbox is where we go just to share a file easily, quickly.
Security is something that we take incredibly seriously. We are dealing with people's hopes and dreams. Dropbox gives you an overview of who has access to any given file and folder at any given time. It's very easy to change those permissions whenever you need to.
It's freed up a lot of the headache around moving content.
I'm honestly not quite sure how we did it before.
With a collaborative tool like this, we're able to have a really tight, amazingly run show.
When you finally get to that theater on the night of the premiere of a film at the Sundance Film Festival, the excitement is always palpable in the room. When we don't have to worry so much about the logistics, we can just focus on putting together the best program of independent films that we possibly can.
One more time, could you explain version control? How do you track them? People can obviously collaborate, but how can you go back several versions?
Yep. Well, it comes back to that architectural structure I talked about. When you think about that 400 megabyte video, for us, you make a change to it. We now have 404 megabytes of data about that video. We don't have two 400 megabyte files. So for us, each version history, or each version is just which file blocks have been changed. Yep. So it's very easy for us to have unlimited version history. And it also means that when a person wants to revert to a previous version, they're not reloading the whole 400 megabyte file. We're swapping out which 4 megabytes are different with that version than what the current version there is. So it becomes very efficient and allows us to provide it in an unlimited capacity.